Well, most of us spent some time over the last week hearing about the legacy of George Herbert Walker Bush. The nation paused on Wednesday for the state funeral of the 41st president amid much talk of character, temperament, dignity, and so forth. Of course, so many of those offering praise were the same ones who were hardly so laudatory of the man when he was still alive, and especially when he was president. But that's easily explained. The death of Bush 41 was yet another opportunity for the elite media to attack President Trump by contrasting Bush's quiet dignity with Trump's brash, bombastic personality. It seemed the media covered most every element of Bush's life and times in their end-to-end coverage of his death and his state funeral, but whether deliberate or not, they missed or overlooked or ignored some vital points about his legacy. Here's one of them. After the 70-year Cold War ended, 7 decades of nuclear tension, countless trillions of dollars spent defending ourselves against the Soviet Union, and unspeakable human suffering by millions in Russia and in Eastern Europe under the boot of communist tyranny, a twilight struggle of freedom against totalitarianism, Bush said not one word about the victory for our way of life. We heard a lot this week about Bush's refusal to celebrate the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union. But here's the question. How could the President of the United States fail to acknowledge, even in carefully selected diplomatic language, the fact that freedom had won its greatest victory in the history of mankind, vanquishing a totalitarian regime responsible for the deaths of some 100 million people and creating what a once obscure but then famous political scientist named Francis Fukuyama called the end of history? But Bush spoke only of the winds of change. Now, if Ronald Reagan, who along with Margaret Thatcher and Pope John Paul were most responsible for taking down the Soviet Empire, if he was still president, he would hardly have characterized the fall of the Soviet Union as simply a product of the winds of change. Furthermore, after that Cold War ended, Bush was asked about all the treasure we would surely save since we had just vanquished what Ronald Reagan called the evil empire. The popular expression at the time was the peace dividend. But Bush said categorically, there is no peace dividend. Really? After spending trillions of dollars fighting a powerful enemy that had finally been discarded into the ash heap of history, there was no peace dividend? And then there's the matter of Bush's New World Order, a phrase he introduced into the American lexicon in a speech outlining his plan for the Gulf War when we kicked the invading Iraqis out of Kuwait.
We are Americans, part of something larger than ourselves. For 2 centuries, we've done the hard work of freedom, and tonight we lead the world in facing down a threat to decency and humanity. What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind.
Well, it is that very new world order that Americans rejected in the most recent presidential election, and globalists struggle mightily to hold off the growing tide of nationalist movements in Europe. Bush's New World Order has clearly frayed and become increasingly unpopular, and that's a big reason Donald Trump was elected president. Then there was something discussed only peripherally and only in a positive vein this week. Bush's war on drugs, the first thing he spoke about when he became president.
Congress needs not only to act on this national drug strategy, but also to act on our crime package announced last May, a package to toughen sentences, beef up law enforcement, and build new prison space for 24,000 inmates. You and I both know the federal government can't do it alone. The states need to match tougher federal laws with tougher laws of their own: stiffer bail, probation, parole, and sentencing. Victory over drugs is our cause, a just cause. And with your help, we are going to win.
Well, he and his fellow drug warriors did not win. Convictions for drug offenders soared, and the lives of many a nonviolent drug user was interrupted or ruined. But drugs today are cheaper, stronger, and more widely available than ever before, and 10 states have now legalized recreational marijuana. Bush's war on drugs was a failure, pure and simple, in both human and economic terms. Then there's the matter of this famous Bush promise and his message about Democrats at the time.
They'll push and I'll say no, and they'll push again and I'll say to them, read my lips.
Now, most of us know now, if we didn't before, that Bush was beaten in his bid for a second term in part because of that broken promise. But it was what was revealed about Bush in raising taxes that few in the media have spoken of. It was Bush's lack of a foundational ideology beyond duty, honor, country, which every president supports. Bush raised taxes because, unlike the man most responsible for Bush's ascent to the presidency, his predecessor Ronald Reagan, Bush saw raising taxes as just political compromise and didn't have a foundational political philosophy, an ideological North Star to stop himself from doing what he'd promised not to do. And then, finally, there was this.
I want a kinder and gentler nation.
Bush said that at the Republican convention in 1988, coming after the bold, brash, plain-spoken language and history-altering actions of his benefactor and predecessor, Ronald Reagan. This was a head-shaker. A kinder, gentler nation, to which Nancy Reagan was said to reply, kinder and gentler than what? We'll break away and come back to discuss Bush's record on liberty with LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza.